ChatGPT and Claude, aren't they actually software as a service?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think anybody that's saying that SaaS is dead is just, they should go read a history book.
Welcome to a new episode of De-Risking Startups. Today, I have a fantastic guest. Is Matthew Vega-Sanz, a co-founder and CEO of Gail. Matthew is a serial entrepreneur, founder Forbes 30 Under 30, an Endeavor entrepreneur. Before Gail, he co-founded Lula, an insurtech company that raised more than 50 million and scaled to serve thousands of businesses. Today, he is building Gail, correct?
Yeah.
Is building Gail, an AI native platform and a mission to become the AI powered brain of financial services. Matthew, welcome to the Risking Startups.
No, yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
Today's conversation, we're going to explore one of the most important questions right now is, can SaaS survive the AI revolution? So AI is reshaping how people interact and with technology and everything. And one of the things I was thinking the other day is like 20 years ago, you can just watch a video on YouTube and know how to fix your car, for instance, or how to fix your washing machine. That doesn't mean that you're gonna do that just because you can. And now people say, now AI will replace jobs. Let's say somebody's an expert in in health. They will use, AI for health, but I don't see that people that are not in that industry are jump into that just because they can, right? What do you think about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I think I think anybody that's saying that SaaS is dead is just, they should go read a history book on the .com era and the cloud era and everything that's happened. I think it's funny. You look at somebody like Mark Benioff. Mark Benioff 20 years ago was selling t-shirts saying software is dead. And so we've seen this pattern before. I think the other thing too is, if you approach what software is by definition, it's a set of instructions that tells a computer how to act. And so to think that software is dead is to think that computers are no longer going to need instructions on how to behave and how to act. And so I think anytime I hear somebody saying like software is dead, AI is going to take over the world, it's very important to just ask yourself, what incentive do they have to say that? And typically, the guys that are saying that are the guys that are investing in the foundational models. They want to push you to use the foundational models. I think back now to 10 years ago when everybody was saying, when those same guys were saying, nobody's going to have a car because of Uber. Nobody's going to have their own space because of Airbnb. We're going to live month to month in apartments or houses. Everybody said a couple of years ago, nobody's going to have a bank account. We're going to be using crypto. Cash is dead. And so anytime I hear that, it's from the same people that were speaking hyperbolically the last couple of years, or with every trend that popped up. And so I always tell founders, like, the easiest way to decide who you should listen to or how smart they are is listen to the stuff that they're saying and compare it to 10 years ago. And you'll see how many of the guys that everybody thinks are relatively smart today, they've been wrong a million times, and they're probably going to be wrong about software this time around too.
The people in AI companies are saying software as a service will die. Isn't ChatGPT and Claude and all those platforms, aren't they actually software as a service?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And take it a step further. They all said, those are the same people that said there was no value to be created on the application layer. I'll never forget when we were starting Gail a year and a half ago, we raised a little bit of money, and it was almost like they would look down upon you to say, if you said you were building on the application layer, because the application layer was where everything was going to be commoditized, and that you should be in building infrastructure. And it's almost like you've seen the language models become the commodity, and you've seen the applications become where the real alpha is. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. These guys really are essentially software businesses. They're just trying to change the name to meet the moment.
And the problem I see today with just the AI is, and I use AI extensively. And in the past, I created a company based on AI and NLP solutions. So I actually love the idea, but I think, people is putting AI at a level that AI is not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so I use it for everything. And the other day I was doing I was evaluating the P&L for my company, and it actually made a wrong, I think it was a multiplication, or it was, adding up something. It was very simple, calculation. It was wrong. What happens if we are talking about something like finances and we are making decisions on capital or my company capital, and AI hallucinate in the middle of that, but you're not an expert to realize that it's hallucinating, or it's hallucinating in something that is not very obvious. What happened in that case, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important for the different founders and business people that are essentially dedicating themselves to building domain specific AI. I think right now, I think anybody that works in a highly regulated space is coming across what you're saying, and it makes a bunch of sense if you look at the way these language models were all trained originally. It was scraping all the free piece of information off the internet. And if you think about the available information on the internet for things like what type of mortgage should I get? What credit card interest rate should I get? What should I be investing in? If you're pulling a lot of that knowledge from places like Reddit and Quora and random forums online, you might be able to train the model on some good information, but you're also going to train it on a lot of really, really bad information as well. And so that opens you up to a lot of risk. I think to your point, there has to be folks that are focus on building this on high quality, high integrity technology, so that the mistakes you mentioned don't happen. Because for some of these things, the stakes are so high. If I use a general purpose AI to help me write a story on Winston Churchill and it gets a date wrong, okay, maybe it was just a small error. It's really nothing bad that happens from that. If, to your point, it makes a bad decision on something financial, that could be pretty circumstantial. And the only way you're going to feel 100% comfortable with that AI is if you had a bunch of specialists train that over a long duration of time.
Yeah. And the other day I was talking with our CTO, and it was like, I feel really comfortable with my CTO doing vibe coding. I don't
Uh,
feel comfortable with people with no knowledge of
yeah,
technology doing vibe coding. It's like,
it's
what
very
is going to,
dangerous.
yeah, what is going to happen in 1 or 2 years with all the software that's being created with, with vibe
Yeah.
coding, right?
I think it's going to open up people to a lot of risk. I think one of the things that's great about AI, I mean, one of the things about AI is oftentimes it's only as good as the instructions you give it. And so if you're one of these people that doesn't understand technology, you're going to by nature give it bad instructions. And so there's a, I had this somebody told me today, they're like, oh, it's with all the AI that's out there, the market is more competitive than ever. Like for whatever product you're building, they're like, there's no moat. There's no moat anymore. The market's more competitive than ever because anybody can build. And I have personally, as somebody who works in who builds AI for highly regulated spaces, my response to him was no, it's actually easier than ever because it used to be so hard to build technology 5, 10, 20 years ago that if you were actually building a website or an app, you had to have a certain level of conviction and thought in order to make that into a good product. Now it's so easy. Yes, there's more products than ever, but most of those products are overwhelmingly done without the thought that's needed to make a great product. And so you have a lot of products that were built without the necessary thought and care and love and attention that was needed. And and I think a lot of that comes from the rookies. The rookies don't realize how much effort it takes to build a great product. So people like your CTO, I think those guys are at a massive advantage because he knows the thought that's needed. And then now he has this thing that makes him superhuman. And so I completely agree. I think the people who have the experience of how to create or how to live without AI are actually going to be better suited to use AI.
Yeah, so I wrote a post the other day, I think it was on LinkedIn. I explained that, in my opinion, AI is more like having a lot of juniors than having a great professional, like a experienced professional in the field.
Mhm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would agree, and I would agree, and I think the other thing too is you can get the AI, because people will always say, to if you make a comment like that, you'll always have that one smart ass. It's like, no, I had this AI do this super complicated reverse discounted cash flow statement, and it's like, all right, but tell me the instructions or the training that you gave it in order to do that. So you had to train the heck out of it to become an expert. When we talk about it being like a junior super smart employee, we're talking about off the shelf or with minimal fine tuning. You had to, yeah, in order to get an AI to be doing something like a reverse discounted cash flow statement, it has to be trained by somebody pretty sophisticated, which 99% of society does not have access to. Um, and so I completely agree. I always tell everybody, it's like having a bunch of smart kids from Stanford. They're going to be really, really smart, but they're going to be missing a lot of context when you have to get into certain topics.
So Matt, let's move from like more generic stuff to specifics. Um, I use a lot of AI. I got to tell you, I don't use it for finance yet. I would love if you can explain a little bit what your company does and examples of all the things that can go wrong if you go straight with AI without a platform that provides the context to that
Yeah,
request.
so our hypothesis is that companies like OpenAI and Anthropic are doing an incredible job with what they're building, but they're building general purpose AI for the general world. And if you work in an industry like banking or insurance or just general financial services, you can't use general AI. You need AI that's built with your nuances, your regulations, and all of that in mind. So that's what we do. We build AI specifically for the world of financial services. And what we did was we trained Gail to be really, really smart on topics like banking, insurance, lending, and all of that. And then we've now, because it's so smart, it's gotten to a point where it could cite exact laws and statutes, industry trends, and all of that. Because it's so smart on this topic, it could now about it in a variety of different ways. It could speak on the phone, on text message, web chat, WhatsApp, email. And then we even have a GPT product, which is the cliche. It's almost like Chat GPT for financial services. And what we do is we sell this to big financial institutions. And so we work a little bit more with folks on the retail side. So where it's very cookie cutter and the margins are a little bit slimmer. If you're a big bank like JP Morgan Chase and one of your customers has $20 million in the bank with you, it doesn't make sense to have an AI maybe answer that phone call. But if you're Progressive Insurance and somebody is calling about their $30 a month renter's insurance, it probably makes sense to have AI there. And it's probably going to be very cookie cutter. So we work a lot with these retail financial institutions who want to deploy these AI agents at scale. And so a couple of examples that are really popular is appointment scheduling. I see your insurance renewal is coming up 30 days from now. Let me schedule an appointment so that we could talk about it. I see that you just signed up to get a mortgage with my bank. Guess what? Um, I know I just saw in your mortgage application you have a car and you have 4 people that live there. Let me see if you want to refinance your auto loan and I'll call you. Another really popular one is things like debt collection. Other ones are doing inbound support. And so, especially after hours, or they might just be using Gail to do claims or fraud. And so, hey, um, I got into a crash. I need to report an accident. And then you have the AI take down all the information, walk the people through whatever it is that they need. And so those are a couple really popular use cases. I'll give you an example as to why it's important to use one of these domain specific AIs. Let's take something like debt collection. Debt collection is a very sensitive topic. You're calling people and you know if you get them on the phone, it's going to be a very uncomfortable conversation for the other side. And so you might have an AI that isn't trained to properly handle somebody who can't pay because their family's in the hospital. And so when you have an AI that's trained, the AI could actually respond relatively empathetically. And what's interesting is you can train it to say, "Hey, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You know what? To lessen the burden, we'll actually let you do some sort of payment plan." And so instead of paying the whole 100%, you can do 25% today, 25% next week. And so now you train the AI to collect the payment, you train the AI to be empathetic, and you train the AI to give that customer a much better experience than a generic AI that would have just said, pay now, pay now, pay now, because they wouldn't have had that context that, hey, you can negotiate partial payments for this specific product. And so that's I'm oversimplifying it with that example, but that's like the type of stuff that highlights the importance of this stuff being trained a particular way.
Do you have
Actually,
any,
I have a funny one for you. I have a
please?
funny one. So we work with a big bank in Mexico, and they use Gail. Funny enough, they use Gail for collections. They use Gail to do credit card upsells, and they put us into a competition to compete against a couple of other the AI players and call centers to do collections. And we started beating that. We within a couple of weeks, we were competing with like 8 or 9 other players, and within a couple of weeks, we ended up winning by a wide margin. And the reason why is we realized that Mexicans, at least over there, answer the phone saying bueno instead of like hola, ¿qué tal? And normally an AI would hear that and it would get completely thrown off and it would ruin the rest of the call. When we train Gail to say, hey, a lot of these people in this particular community answer the phone saying bueno, that's their way of greeting. Gail was able to respond accordingly. And then Gail ended up performing magnificently relative to the other AIs in this competition. And so again, that's a simple example, but that just goes to show how even the most basic training has massive uh, benefits. Funny enough, we in Colombia, we use an accent de una paisa, and some guys would try to get carried away, and we had to tighten up the guardrails to make sure that everybody, that the humans would behave. And then even here in certain communities, you'll see some people, it's kind of sad, but some people do get a little bit sad or they get lonely in some of these Midwest country and some of these parts of the Midwest. And so you'll have some of the businesses that use Gale in the Midwest, they'll loosen up the guardrails so that Gail could talk about random stuff. And so it'll stay talking to somebody about what's going on in the world right now for 20 minutes to almost act as a companion. And so it's really interesting the patterns that you see and the different styles that different businesses undergo this type of stuff.
Do you have any examples of things, clients that were not using your platform? They were probably trying to use like more like basic AI without any like framework like you're using, and things that went wrong because of that?
Yeah, I mean, we have a bunch. We had somebody that was using the AI to again, collections is a really easy example, but they were using AI to have collections and they were using one of these general purpose AIs. They were using one of these general purpose AIs that hadn't been given the proper guardrails. And one of the guardrails that it hadn't been given is you can't accept credit card information without a PCI certification. It's a specific certification here in the United States to collect credit card and banking information on the phone and then to store it. And so we were on a sales call and we talked about how that was one of the things that we would be getting in the near term was this compliance. And their legal department lost their mind on that call because when they went back and looked at the records, they technically had opened themselves up to millions of dollars in potential fines for not using domain specific AI that knew, hey, if you hear somebody talking about a banking number, transferred to a live human.
That's crazy. That's crazy. It's very interesting that uh, these type of technologies are right now creating new opportunities, but also new challenges and risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
what what are the main risks that come up to your mind when when you think about your industry that is being developed right now with AI?
I think the ones that like we have to do a lot of stuff with documentation, and I think some of these AIs have gotten so good that it could easily clone a certificate of insurance or a mortgage application and make it look hyper real. And so there's a lot of fraud that's gonna come out with this technology. I think even from an image perspective, like the quality of images are so good now with some of these technologies that the amount of people are going to be able to file fraudulent claims and say, "Hey, my house burnt down or whatever, my house got this damage." If you don't send somebody out to see the house now, if you don't send somebody else, sometimes they even see the paper or the document, it's going to be really hard to prove that it's those things are false. And so the thing that concerns me quite a bit is what's going to happen from a fraud perspective. People think that insurance in places like Florida are expensive because of the claims. It's not, because places like Florida and California are notorious for fraud. And now you're giving these fraudsters the most incredible technology to commit further fraud.
That's interesting. I remember watching a video of I don't remember his name, but it's Mr. Abagnale Jr.
Mm.
Is the guy behind Catch Me If You Can. The movie Catch Me
Yeah,
If You Can. That's a real. I think it's like not totally a real story, but it's based on a
yeah,
real story from is Frank Abagnale Jr.
yeah,
And he was giving this talk, and some people asked, it was very easy to do that, 34 years ago, but now it's more complicated. He said, no, now it's way easier because
yeah,
I had to do everything by hand. He had to like basically use a Gutenberg style press by
yeah,
himself in order to print the bills. But now you don't need that. You don't have technology to do all that. So it's true. It is, and how you catch up with all the new fraud is going to be going
mm,
on. Even, you know, years ago, you receive an email that looks like Chase. You click, and it was a phishing problem. Now you can go to a website. It looks just like it. The login looks
yeah.
just like it. How do you deal with all of that?
I think there's a lot of different ways. I think one of the things that is going to be pretty important is stuff like data labeling. And so this is one of those things that I hear all the time, like, oh, accountants are not going to have a job, or like KYC analysts are not going to have jobs in the next few years. It's like, no, those people are actually going to become more important than ever, because an accountant of 30 years has probably seen every document under the sun. And so that accountant from 30 years is going to actually be able to look at those documents. And if one thing is slightly off, their intuition is going to be able to catch it. And they have to teach the AI how to have that level of intuition. And so I think that's a way to fight against a fraud, is actually to go out and find these people that are closer to towards the end of the year, whether they're 40, 50, they're freaking out because they think they're going to be replaced, and use them to say, hey, you have 20 or 30 years of experience seeing fraudulent documents, seeing all types of things. Let me bring you in so that you can actually teach the AI yourself. And I think that's going to be the way you do it. Is you have to have some of these people. I think the other thing is there is probably going to have to be some sort of regulation in terms of who can get access to certain models and who can get access to certain technologies. And you kind of see it already today. You can, for instance, I forget if it was Claude or ChatGPT. The other day, I tried to edit my logo, and it said, because you're using a Meet Gail account for this request, I'll let it happen. And so you're already seeing a little bit of tightening like that. I think you'll have to see more versions of that type of control be put into place to deal with this fraud.
And once we move forward with it, with the AI, and right now you have ChatGPT, you have Gemini, Claude, they have a lot of other ones that are appearing every day. At the end of the day, you have the transformer models behind it. Um, what I'm thinking is maybe AI will become a commodity, and the software companies are the ones that have to create the differentiators.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's I think it's 100% accurate. That's why I think the application layer is so I think the application layer is really where all the value is going to be created. Like if you look at it right now, we just had the first application layer company was just announced today for $60 billion with Cursor. And so we're 2 years into the craze. What are the acquisitions gonna look like in 3 or 4 years from now? They're only gonna get bigger. And so, yeah, I completely agree. We're gonna have to, people are gonna have to start to pay a lot more attention to building on the application layer. It's almost like the internet. The internet, whoever built the browsers were obviously incredibly good businesses, but the ones that ultimately ended up building the biggest businesses were the guys that built the applications of the internet, which was Amazon, was Meta, and the list goes on.
If you can give an advice to a entrepreneur who wants to build a startup, they're supposed to focus on creating value?
I think the biggest, I think it depends on one more than anything. What type of life do you want? Do you want a life where you're just gonna make a quick $30,000 or $40,000 a month? Then go do a services business where you go to businesses, you charge you maybe $2,000 or $3,000 a month, and you say, "Hey, I'm gonna set up all your AI automations." That like that is the easiest way to make $100,000 right now a month. And anybody who wants to get to that point, great. If they want to build truly a big business that's doing millions on a monthly basis or even billions on an annual basis, the best way to do it is find a specific niche and just configure AI for that. So you saw Harvey and Lagora have both built, I think, $10 billion companies. They took AI and they made it for legal and professional services. You see a company like us, we're doing very well. We took AI and configured it for financial services. And we're fortunate that companies like us, had resources from day one because of our previous exits or success. You could start off super small. You could just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to start off with configuring AI to service Cuban mortgage brokers. And you could actually make a pretty good business off of that. And then once you get a playbook there with the Cuban mortgage brokers, I'm going to go do the Puerto Ricans and the people in Venezuela, or like the Venezuelans that are in Doral. And you could actually build much bigger businesses with these niches and people anticipate. And so that's what I would do. I would find a service or a sector and just configure AI for it. They don't have to create anything new from scratch. They just have to configure it.
You already built several companies. How you define which kind of company you want to create? What's problem you want to solve?
I think I look for problems in my life, and then I'm always the first customer. And so I think when I've tried to build products that I wouldn't be a customer for, it's never worked out well for me. I know other people have had better experiences doing that, but I haven't. And so for me, the first way that I always think about is I want to solve a problem for myself. And so I always want to solve a problem for myself. And then there's a lot of other people like me who need that same problem solved. And so that's how I always think about it is, will I be the first customer? Because if I'm the first customer, I'll have a much more intimate understanding of what problem I need to solve, how to distribute it, how to talk about it. And so for me, that's how I always think about starting something new. It's like, let me solve the problem for myself. And I guarantee, usually there's enough other people who have that same problem that I had and need that same solution. So that's how I always do it. I always start with a problem and work backwards.
If you compare clients from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, do you see any transformation in their expectations?
Yeah, I think the expectations are way higher today. I think a lot of it has to do with the current marketing environment. Like if you look at every time Google releases a new AI product, they put out the most incredible launch videos, and then it just never ends up working like that. But most people just see the launch video. And so when they come to us and they say, hey, Google just released this, you're an AI company, you're funded, you have resources, it should behave just how Google did in the video. It's like, dude, Google's AI from the video doesn't even work like that. How are you going to expect us when we just got access to it yesterday? So it sets a lot of false expectations, especially all these launch videos you see every day. But I think that's also where the opportunity is. Like one of the things that counterintuitive we saw, if you look at our space, 95% of pilots in the financial services industry fail. Going back to my earlier point, it's because these generic AIs don't work well for these regulated industries. You look at us, we close 80% of our pilots. And when people ask why, it's because we now know very well what Gail is good and what it's not good at. And so we're able to come off as much more trustworthy when we tell you all the things Gail can't do from the start. And then we're also much more focused in terms of where Gail could help. And so that helps onboard people faster. That gives them a certain level of confidence when they see we're not all over the place too.
It's funny. It's like, it's very hard to compete with companies offering products that won't even exist in 3 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Fantastic. So do you think that AI at some point will replace software service, will make software service accelerate or turn it into something different? What's your idea? You have a lot of experience in the field, so.
I think it'll grow these industries because I think people are getting so much more interested in technology now that you're going to see more buyers of software. I think you might see a couple of the big guys bring some of this stuff in-house. And so maybe they'll build their own CRM as opposed to using Salesforce. But I think for the overall community, I think overall society, you're actually going to see software as a service go up because now people are going to want to, like, people are hearing so much about technology, they're going to start to adopt it in even the most simple ways. And so I think software in the long run is going to end up actually growing quite a bit.
So we are in a point in history that I think, in the moment of the first internet wave was, of course, it was a revolution, but a different type of revolution, because in order to create a website, whatever, you need to have some technical expertise. In this case, people without any technical expertise can launch anything. So basically, it's different because of that. And also because now the customers are using AI. So their expectations are changing and getting higher. But also from your side, the technology that you use is evolving almost every week or every month. How do you build a company like yours that you have to provide like a stable solution? Because when you sell to an end client, it's different. When you sell to corporations, you have to be, corporate level. Means that stable, have to work fine, tested. How you do that when at the same time they're asking you change, right?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we are like, you hear agile software development or almost going project by project. We very much have to do that. Um, we work with more than 300 companies now, and I would say almost all of the enterprises we work with have needed to start in one specific area, and then it's almost like you do baby steps. You start with one department, then another department, then another department. And we've had to do it like that because if you try to go into 20 departments on day one, it becomes so messy, it becomes so chaotic that it ends up being a horrible experience for everybody. And so that's a way that we've had to approach it. It's almost like team by team by team. And we could do that stuff in parallel, but it's almost like a new employee. You don't want to throw too much at an organization on day one. You want to bring that employee or that new team member to start in one particular part of your business before it goes into the other. And that's the way that we've done it. We see some of these big, and I think would say all of our corporate customers actually prefer it that way because they want to take those baby steps. And you have a lot of startups that try to force them into bigger contracts, into doing these massive implementations. and it actually ends up being a losing strategy. I think we've had a lot of success letting people move at the pace they need, especially these bigger corporations.
And so, what are the skills, features, or characteristics that you think can turn a company into either if a startup into vulnerable or positioned to win based on this context that we've been talking?
Yeah, I think what would put a company in like vulnerable positions, the obvious bad stewards of capital, you spend money dumb. But I think a couple of other ones is not having a bias for action, and then I'd say that's a big one. And the other one that I would say is just start like, especially now because products are so easy to build. People are building a lot of products that are nice to haves rather than products that are actually solving problems. And I think that's the Achilles heel for a lot of startups is when they stop solving problems. If you're solving problems, people are always going to want to pay you to solve that problem. But if you're not solving problems, that's a completely different story. And so I think that puts businesses in a pretty vulnerable position. I think what puts you in, I think what puts you into a position of strength is, are you growing and are you positioning yourself to be alive 10 years from now? And because if you just focus on staying alive 10 years from now, from a statistical perspective, 95% of your competition will be dead in the next 10 years. And so it almost doesn't even matter if you grow fast. It just matters that you're around 10 years from now because everybody else will be dead and you will naturally just be the winner. And so I think, and how do you get vulnerable? Spend money like an idiot and stop solving problems for your customers. And how do you win? Just build a company that can stay around the next 10 years.
Wow, that's a big objective. It's not.
Yeah. Easier said than it's simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah. So we have this. I wrote a book actually on the risk in startups, and what I've seen after years of research is that the companies that win are the ones that last longer. And to last longer, you need to constantly risk your company. Your risk is going to be there all the time, but you need to be quick on facing those risks and managing them. Yeah, otherwise, but it's hard to last longer. And connected to that, do you think it's going to be any impact, any change in the way that companies, because right now the idea in any entrepreneur is either I build this company and I sell it, or I go to an IPO. That process that has been in our industry for like forever, do you think it's going to change right now with the AI era and the creation of new companies in a quicker manner? It's going to be more M&As. I don't know. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I think we're gonna see. I think that I wasn't around in the '80s, so everything I'm going off of is breeding. But I think from what I read, I think we're about to enter a craze of buyouts, like that was very similar to what you saw in the 1980s. I think, yeah, I think you're gonna see M&A galore. Like, I think right now there's a lot of businesses that are trading at all-time lows, and it makes a lot of sense to just transform them with AI. Like, I'll give you an example. The call center industry. The call center industry is $500 billion industry. And it makes a lot of sense to buy up these companies and implement AI across the board with them. I think you're going to start to see in the next couple of months some massive moves made there. And then I think you're going to see that across a lot of other sectors. I think the other thing too that's going to happen is you're going to have a lot of companies that are going to take the Elon approach of what he's doing right now. They're going to raise capital at a crazy high valuation, and then they're just going to go on a shopping spree and offer only stock. So they're doing all these acquisitions on only and without having to pay any cash for it. And so I think it's a brilliant idea. I think you're going to see a lot of people do that. A company like Stripe could all of a sudden do that. They could all of a sudden maybe go buy Column, or they could go buy some of these fintechs like Slash, and they could start to get market share like that. I think you'll see that maybe with OpenAI and Anthropic. You already see them make a couple of acquisitions, and their stock price are getting so high, they can make some pretty big acquisitions without having to put any cash on the table. And so I think you're about to see a renaissance for the M&A markets. And I think a lot of these AI companies are going to ultimately end up serving as almost mini R&D teams for these big incumbents. Like we saw it with Cursor. Instead of Elon and his team spending the last 4 years building the best coding AI, he let somebody else spend all the time and money on the learnings. Once they had learned enough and gotten good enough distribution, they swooped in and bought them. So I think you're going to see a lot of that happen in these next couple of years.
What would you tell the 18-year-old Matt right now?
I would tell him right now is the greatest time ever to live, and to thank God every day that he was born in this era and that he got the opportunity to live in this incredible moment that we're in right now. And I would tell him there's an opportunity right now for you to take care of your family and for generations if you apply yourself right. And I would tell him, hey, find a particular niche. Let's use insurance, for example. Let's go find something like insurance that's not sexy, that's predominantly dominated by older people who aren't as tech savvy, and build an AI that solves their problems. And you are going to be able to take care of your mom, your dad. You'll be able to buy back the family farm, and you'll be able to have an incredible life and actually add value to society by building technology that actually helps some of the world's most important industries. That's like the advice I'd give him and give my brothers if they were 18 and everybody else.
And that counts as my last question that was going to be what advice would you give to all the entrepreneurs, but that counts and it's a beautiful closing. So
Well,
Matt,
I would actually say one more. I would say, because there's so
Go
much negativity. There's so much negativity out there. I would tell everybody, go read a book and you're going to see that we really do live right now in the best time ever. And if you get off Twitter and you get off Instagram and you go walk down the street, you're going to see people don't hate each other. People don't dislike each other. And so I would say, like, you hear the whole thing, like you hear that famous quote, fortune favors the bold. I would take it a step further. Fortune favors the optimist. And so my advice to everybody is, it's easy to look at everything from a negative perspective. I would encourage you to be a contrarian and look at everything from the positive perspective. And rather than thinking, oh man, this could go wrong, I would start to encourage people to think about what happens if this goes right? What happens if this works out? And then go take the risk and manifest it going right. And you'll be surprised by how often, if you manifest things going right, they ultimately end up becoming right.
Totally agree. And it's a beautiful, beautiful way to close this interview. Matt, I really enjoy talking with you. Amazing. All the knowledge you share with us. Thank you very much.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me, man. Appreciate it.